the skies above the South China Sea, Philippine fighter jets now fly missions that would have been impossible just a decade ago. At sea, modern warships patrol waters once dominated by aging vessels and outdated equipment. And behind many of these changes stands an unlikely partner. Not the United States, not Japan. South Korea, a country once focused almost entirely on defending itself from North Korea, is now helping rebuild the military of one of Southeast Asia's most strategically important nations. And it couldn't have happened at a more critical time.
China Coast Guard vessel 3305 is Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources NMUV 3004 BFT Tatu Pacao.
The South China Sea has become one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints. Almost every month, tensions flare between China and the Philippines. Coast Guard vessels collide. Water cannons blast through the windows of supply boats. Military aircraft patrol contested skies. And rival claims bring two nations into increasingly frequent confrontation. As these incidents dominate headlines, most people assume the Philippines is relying on one country above all others. The United States. After all, Washington and Manila have been treaty allies for more than 70 years. American troops train in the Philippines. American forces operate throughout the region. And the alliance remains at the center of Philippine security. But look a little closer. The fighter jets now flying for the Philippine Air Force? They came from South Korea. The modern frigates, strengthening the Philippine Navy, built in South Korea. And one of the fastest growing defense partnerships in Asia today is not between Manila and Washington. It's between Manila and Seoul. That may sound surprising. South Korea is usually associated with smartphones, semiconductors, automobiles, and K-pop. Not warships, not fighter jets, and certainly not the South China Sea. Yet over the last decade, South Korea has quietly become one of the most important contributors to Philippine military modernization. Today, South Korean-built aircraft patrol Philippine skies. South Korean-built warships sail Philippine waters. And South Korean defense companies are helping reshape the future of the Philippine military. So how did this happen? Why has the Philippines increasingly turned to South Korea to rebuild its air force and navy? And what does this growing partnership reveal about the changing balance of power in the Indo-Pacific? To answer those questions, we need to go back to a time when the Philippine military faced a problem that threatened its ability to defend its own waters. For much of the Cold War, the Philippines relied heavily on the United States for its security. American military bases operated across the country, and the alliance helped deter external threats. But when the Cold War ended, Manila's priorities began to change. Instead of preparing for conflicts at sea, the Philippine military focused primarily on internal security. For years, the country's armed forces were occupied with fighting insurgent groups and terrorist organizations at home. As a result, modernization took a back seat. The Navy received limited investment. The Air Force struggled to replace aging aircraft. And critical capabilities were gradually lost. Perhaps nowhere was this more visible than in the skies.
FA-15, number 006.
By the mid-2000s, the Philippines no longer operated a modern supersonic fighter force. For a country made up of more than 7,600 islands, this was a serious challenge. The Philippines sits along some of the world's most important shipping routes. It also faces territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Yet it lacked many of the tools needed to monitor and defend its vast maritime domain. At the same time, the regional security environment was changing. China was rapidly expanding its military capabilities. Its navy grew larger, its coast guard became more active, and its presence in disputed waters increased dramatically. Then came a turning point. In 2012, a standoff between Chinese and Philippine vessels erupted around Scarborough Shoal. The confrontation ended with China maintaining effective control over the area. For many in Manila, the incident was a wake-up call. It exposed the gap between the Philippines' security ambitions and its actual military capabilities. The message was becoming impossible to ignore. The Philippines could no longer afford to delay modernization. It needed new aircraft, new ships, new technology, and perhaps most importantly, it needed partners who could help rebuild its military quickly. The obvious choice was the United States. But as Manila began searching for affordable and modern equipment, another country emerged with an offer that was difficult to ignore: South Korea.
Our closer defense, security, and maritime cooperation reflects our mutual trust as we respond to a rapidly evolving international security environment.
At first glance, South Korea may seem like an unlikely military partner for the Philippines. Most people associate the country with global brands like Samsung and Hyundai. Others think of K-pop, technology, and one of Asia's most successful economies. But behind that image lies another story. Over the past few decades, South Korea has quietly built one of the most advanced defense industries in the world. For years, Seoul invested heavily in developing its own military equipment. The reason was simple. South Korea lives under constant security pressure from North Korea. To reduce its dependence on foreign suppliers, it built the capacity to design and manufacture its own aircraft, warships, missiles, and armored vehicles. Eventually, South Korean companies began exporting those systems overseas. And they quickly developed a reputation for something many countries were looking for: modern equipment, reasonable prices, and fast delivery. For the Philippines, that combination was extremely attractive. Manila wanted to modernize its military, but it faced budget constraints. Advanced American or European systems were often expensive and could take years to arrive. South Korea offered another option. Its equipment was modern enough to significantly improve Philippine capabilities, but it was also affordable enough for Manila to purchase in larger numbers. Just as importantly, South Korean companies could often deliver equipment faster than many competitors. At exactly the moment the Philippines was searching for new military partners, South Korea was expanding its role as a global defense exporter. The timing could not have been better. What began as a search for new military equipment soon evolved into something much larger. Because South Korea wasn't just selling products, it was helping rebuild capabilities the Philippines had lost years earlier. And nowhere was that transformation more visible than in the air. The first major symbol of this new partnership would arrive in the form of a fighter jet. For years, the Philippine Air Force faced a difficult reality. It no longer operated a modern supersonic fighter aircraft. As older aircraft retired, replacements failed to arrive. The result was a capability gap that lasted for years. This was a major problem. The Philippines is an island nation spread across a vast maritime area. Protecting its airspace and monitoring its surrounding waters requires aircraft that can respond quickly and operate over long distances. As tensions in the South China Sea continued to grow, rebuilding air power became increasingly urgent. That is where South Korea entered the picture. In 2014, the Philippines signed a deal to acquire 12 FA-50 fighter aircraft from Korea Aerospace Industries. For Manila, the purchase represented much more than a simple arms deal. It marked the return of modern fighter aviation. The FA-50 was not the most advanced fighter in the world, nor was it designed to compete directly with high-end aircraft operated by major powers. But that wasn't its purpose. The aircraft was fast, reliable, relatively affordable, and capable of performing multiple missions. It could train pilots, conduct air patrols, support military operations, and help monitor the country's vast maritime approaches. When the first aircraft entered service, they quickly became one of the most visible symbols of Philippine military modernization. For the first time in years, Philippine pilots once again had access to a modern supersonic combat aircraft. The impact went beyond the aircraft themselves. Pilots received new training, maintenance crews developed new skills, and the Air Force gained experience operating a modern platform. In many ways, the FA-50 helped rebuild an entire ecosystem of military aviation. Its success also strengthened confidence in South Korea as a defense partner. The aircraft performed well, deliveries were completed, and the relationship between the two countries deepened. As a result, Manila decided to go even further. In 2025, the Philippines approved the purchase of 12 additional FA-50 aircraft, effectively doubling the fleet. The decision reflected more than satisfaction with the aircraft. It reflected trust. Trust in the platform, trust in the supplier, and trust in a partnership that was becoming increasingly important to Philippine security. But while the FA-50 helped revive Philippine air power, another challenge remained. The Philippines did not only need to defend its skies, it also needed to defend its waters. And in the South China Sea, that challenge was even greater. If the FA-50 helped restore Philippine air power, the situation at sea was even more important. After all, the Philippines' biggest security challenges were unfolding in the South China Sea. This is where territorial disputes continue to shape regional politics. It is where Philippine vessels regularly encounter Chinese Coast Guard ships, and it is where Manila needs the ability to maintain a constant presence. For decades, that was easier said than done. The Philippine Navy operated a number of aging vessels, many of which were originally built for other countries and transferred to Manila years later. They could patrol the country's waters, but they were not designed for the increasingly complex challenges emerging in the South China Sea. As tensions grew, the need for a modern navy became impossible to ignore. Once again, South Korea emerged as a key partner. The first major breakthrough came with the Jose Rizal-class frigates, built by South Korean shipbuilders. These vessels represented a major leap forward for the Philippine Navy. Compared to many of the ships they replaced, the difference was dramatic. The frigates featured modern sensors, improved communication systems, and the ability to operate helicopters. More importantly, they gave the Navy a stronger presence in contested waters. For the Philippines, these ships were more than just new additions to the fleet. They were symbols of a broader transformation. And the relationship did not stop there. South Korean companies continued winning contracts to build additional vessels for the Philippine Navy. Offshore patrol vessels followed. New guided missile frigates entered the pipeline. Future cooperation expanded into discussions about even more advanced naval capabilities. A clear pattern was beginning to emerge. South Korea was not simply selling the Philippines a few ships. It was helping modernize an entire fleet. That mattered because the Philippines was never trying to match China ship for ship. Such a goal would be unrealistic. China's navy remains vastly larger. Its Coast Guard fields some of the world's largest patrol vessels, and its shipbuilding industry operates on an enormous scale. Instead, Manila's goal has been far more practical: to improve its ability to patrol its waters, to respond to incidents more effectively, and to maintain a credible presence in disputed areas. In that effort, every new ship matters. Every additional patrol capability matters. And every improvement in readiness matters. By the mid-2020s, South Korea had become one of the most important contributors to Philippine naval modernization. The transformation was happening gradually, but it was unmistakable. And as aircraft and warships continued to strengthen the Philippine military, the relationship between Manila and Seoul was beginning to evolve into something even bigger than defense procurement. It was becoming a strategic partnership. By now, a pattern should be clear. South Korea is not simply supplying a few aircraft. It is not simply building a few ships. Over the past decade, South Korea has become one of the most important contributors to Philippine military modernization. And that raises an important question. Why does this relationship matter? The answer goes beyond fighter jets and warships, because what is taking shape between Manila and Seoul is not just a defense supplier relationship. It is a strategic partnership. In 2024, the Philippines and South Korea officially elevated their ties to a strategic partnership. The move reflected years of growing cooperation in defense, security, trade, and regional affairs. For the Philippines, the benefits are obvious. The country gains access to modern military equipment, training, technology, and long-term support. But South Korea also has its own reasons for strengthening ties with Manila. South Korea is one of the world's most trade-dependent economies. Much of its trade and energy imports travel through the waters of the Indo-Pacific. That includes the South China Sea. Any major disruption to these routes could have serious economic consequences. In other words, stability in the South China Sea matters to South Korea too. And as geopolitical competition intensifies across Asia, Seoul is increasingly looking beyond the Korean peninsula. It is becoming more active across the wider Indo-Pacific. The Philippines fits naturally into that strategy. Located at the crossroads of Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, the country occupies one of the most important strategic positions in the region. That does not mean South Korea is trying to challenge China directly. Nor does it mean the Philippines is suddenly becoming a military power capable of matching Beijing. China still possesses overwhelming advantages in ships, aircraft, missiles. and industrial capacity. That reality has not changed. But the goal of modernization was never to achieve parity with China. The goal was to narrow the gap, to improve readiness, to strengthen deterrence, and to ensure that the Philippines can better protect its interests. This is where South Korea's contribution becomes significant. Every fighter aircraft delivered, every warship launched, every training program completed, adds another layer to the Philippines' defense capabilities. And South Korea is not acting alone. The United States remains Manila's most important ally. Japan continues to expand security cooperation. Australia has deepened defense ties. Together, these partnerships are helping the Philippines build a stronger and more capable military. Not overnight, but step by step. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of this story. The balance of power in the South China Sea is not changing because of a single ship or a single fighter jet. It is changing because countries across the region are gradually strengthening their capabilities and expanding their partnerships. A decade ago, few people would have imagined South Korea playing such a major role in Philippine security. Today, South Korean-built fighter jets patrol Philippine skies. South Korean-built warships sail Philippine waters. And South Korea has become one of the key partners helping shape the future of the Philippine military. The alliance between Manila and Washington may still dominate the headlines. But quietly, steadily, and with growing importance, another partnership has emerged. One that could play a major role in the future of the Indo-Pacific. The partnership between the Philippines and South Korea.